What's up everybody, welcome back to another video. Today I am going to be looking at every championship transfer that has happened within this summer transfer window so far. There has been quite a lot and it'll be a bit overwhelming for me to try and catch up on it. So what I'm really going to do is just kind of go through every club. I'm going to go on Transfermarkt, which hopefully by the time I'm recording should record every transfer that has happened so far in the championship. If I've missed any out, that would be down to the website, but also me potentially forgetting as well. So if I do miss anyone out, please let me know in the comments down below so I can be fair and give my honest reaction. And that's pretty much what it's going to be. I'm going to look at the ins and the outs, my thoughts on them, and how I think, have they helped or have they hindered in terms of my expectations on these teams this season. You would have seen my early predictions, which I released a couple of days ago. And not to forget, these are only my early predictions. These are only my early thoughts in the moment. And it was good in a way just to kind of see you guys commenting on that. It was gave me a very interesting insight of a couple of fans to see, you know, if they were optimistic or if they were very pessimistic of their team's chances. It was an interesting insight actually. So without any further ado, I'm going to start. If you guys enjoy what you see, please smash the like button because it really does help the growth of this channel. We actually gained a little bit of traction after the last video, so thank you guys so much considering that I've been not really posting properly for over a month now. So thank you guys so much. Please hit the subscribe button if you've not done so as well. That also really helps. And please share the video too. All these things really do come at a really big help. But without any further ado, let's now go through each championship team and I'll give you my reaction on their transfer window. We start off here, as you can see, with Birmingham. So they'll be the first team we start whenever we've got to do these alphabetical videos in this season at least. So I already like that they've got Dion Sanderson back. He has been proven to be a reliable championship defender and he was, I'd say, quite decent for Birmingham. Ethan Laird, I'm a big fan of. He's already had championship experience. I think first, notably, when I saw him at Swansea, he was really solid in his role there. Tyler Roberts from Leeds really does stand out. I think that is a very brave, but a really could potentially be a game-changing signing, honestly. I really do think that could be one of the better signings I've seen from Birmingham. And Keshi Anderson, which was quite recent, actually. Interesting to say the least. Keshi Anderson had a really good period of form at one stage, especially last season. If we're talking about, you know, the recent season when Blackpool got relegated, Keshi Anderson didn't really show those same levels. But I think if you give him a good run of games, he really could prove to be a good championship winger. Miyoshi from Royal Antwerp, not really seen a lot of the Belgian league, so I can't really comment on it, but an attacking midfielder, 26 years of age, could come in a decent experience there. Christian Bielik coming in from Derby, they've now made his deal permanent, which is great. Siriki Dembele coming in, I think that's a brilliant signing as well. Then we've got a couple of youth players being promoted to the first team. So you can see with the outgoings, the major one here is Tahith Chong, 4.7 million to Premier League Luton Town. Tahith Chong would have been up there for my top 2 best players for Birmingham last season. So it's a bit of a shame that Birmingham couldn't have that same luck to retain one of their lone players like they managed to do, for instance, with Bielik successfully and unsuccessfully with Chong. But if you're going to get a Premier League club offering big money, you're never really going to turn that down, really. Joe Bellingham is also a little bit of a shame. I would have loved to see him stay at Birmingham a little bit longer, but, you know, not to worry for us Championship fans. He will be in a Championship club, but in the form of Sunderland. I actually think that's going to be a very interesting signing for Sunderland. George Friend has also left for Bristol Rovers, getting on a little bit, 35 years of age. Obviously, very experienced player, but clearly Eustace wanting to potentially inject a couple more youth talent within that squad. And you can see with more older and experienced players like Harley Dean, Maxine Colan and Troy Dealing, with them being let go, I think that's definitely the theme here. So overall, I quite like Birmingham's window at the moment. You know, ingoings I quite like, outgoings, most of them I think make sense. And I think especially with the Chong one, you know, I don't think they really could have done a lot, especially with a Premier League club coming knocking. So I've got to say, I think Birmingham have done a really good job so far with their transfer window. Now we move on to Blackburn Rovers, and you can already see that there's really not that much going on at this time, especially compared to what Birmingham had done. Now, in terms of people they got in, Niall Ellis, I'm a big fan of, from Plymouth Argyle. I think he could be decent as a centre forward. I have also seen him playing a little bit more advanced down wide as well. I think he can be a really, really good option, actually. I'm really impressed. Sigurdsson and Tronstad I've not seen a lot of. So Sigurdsson, they've managed to get on loan. Both relatively of a youngish age with decent experience, 24 and 27 years of age. And coming from pretty decent leagues with the Russian League and, of course, the Dutch League. And with that, that's pretty much Blackburn signings at the moment. So Ennis I've seen, so I know what to expect from him. But with Tronstad and Sigurdsson, I've not. So these two potentially could be a really big surprise for us, and hopefully they will be. Now, in terms of outgoings, the big one is Ben Brereton Diaz, and the big disappointing part is that Blackburn didn't get a fee. They let his contract go for right to the end, and it meant that he left on a free. And look at that market value of 16 million euros. That is what they've potentially missed out on, and that is very disappointing. With the rest of the outgoings, Butterworth going down to Carlisle United, who are now a League One team. I'm still trying to get used to that. James Brown, and then you've got Dak and Ayala leaving the club. So with this, I'm impressed with Ennis, and maybe Tronstad and Sigurdsson could be amazing players. But I'm very disappointed with Blackburn failing to cash in and being able to find a transfer for Brereton Diaz before his contract ran out, and obviously they didn't agree on the contract. Next, we have got Bristol City. Now, this is going to be very, very interesting to look at. So, they have got Rob McCrory from Aberdeen. Don't know a lot about it, but they did pay 2.3 million euros for him. So, Bristol City clearly see a player there with a very important role, a defensive midfielder as well. And actually, I do feel a defensive midfielder is what they really needed. I truly think a defensive midfielder that can potentially stop any spaces opening with the opposing team's attacks, I think is really what they needed. I think they lacked a structure in that area. So I'm really glad they got someone like McCrory in. Rob Dickey, I'm already, quite excited to see how he gets on there. Especially if he were to repeat what he previously did with QPR in the beginning part of his spell there. Hayden Roberts from Brighton is interesting, and Jason Knight, getting him from Derby, I also think is very interesting. Very youthful signings, maybe with the exception of Rob Dickey, a little bit more experienced, but definitely very youth themed. And I've seen a lot of these players, maybe with the exception of McCrory, very, very well. So I do know that they can do a job. It's a question whether they make an impact on the starting 11, and that's the only doubt I have. With the outgoings, they've only lost Jay De Silva to a championship rival in Coventry, Kane Wilson, who drops down the league to join Derby County, and then you've got Noah Masengo and Taylor Moore without a club there from Transfermarkt. So pretty much the only one that could really come to bite them is Jay De Silva when Bristol City had to play against Coventry, because it was a free transfer. It wasn't like a loan transfer where we couldn't play. So really with that, they've not lost anyone too major, in my opinion. De Silva probably more of a starting player than Masengo, Moore and Wilson, more squad field players there. But other than that, I actually think Bristol City have not done so badly with their transfer window. It's been very interesting and, got to say, probably quite ambitious as well. So I'm more intrigued than anything to see how they get on with this, because I actually think they have improved their squad. We now turn our attention to Cardiff. Do just ignore the Roy Keane picture at the bottom there. So, for Cardiff City, we have got a couple of transfers which I actually think are quite interesting. Ike Ugbo from Troyes, I think that's how you say it actually. Interesting, I have heard about him, and he has been linked, I think, in previous championship seasons. So, very excited to now see him, how he actually does within the championship there. Gutas from Sisespor from the Turkish league, I think it's interesting too. Yakumete, I have seen quite a fair bit. I don't think he was particularly effective last season, but he has proven to be a crucial player at times for Reading when he was called upon. So if he can have that same grit here, he could prove to be a good signing. Carlin Grant, I think, is a very interesting signing as well. We've seen the amount of goals he can score. With his debut championship season where he was relegated with Huddersfield from the Premier League, he actually scored a decent amount of goals, but since then that he's been really struggling to get into the Huddersfield team, and he's been getting moves elsewhere. West Brom has not gone so well for him. I think a loan move here to Cardiff, where he will be relied upon, I think, quite a fair bit more, I think is really going to test him, actually. But the major signing for me is Aaron Ramsey. So yeah, 32 years of age. I don't think he's got too much time left, personally, but it's not like that he's really knocking on his doorstep for retirement. I think this is going to be maybe aimed to be a bit of a sentimental, nostalgic signing, those sorts of things. But he is really experienced. We cannot undermine his experience within the Premier League, especially when he was with Arsenal. So I do think he will be a very important player, just to kind of unite some of the players that probably feel, you know, very unconfident about how they're approaching. Because I think Cardiff in general has been such a downward spiral. They really need some inspiration from someone. And I think maybe Aaron Ramsey could be that player. So, you can see the outgoings here. Sang has gone to Port Vale. Gavin White has gone to Portsmouth in League One. Dillon Phillips, who I personally actually quite liked as a second choice goalkeeper, he has actually gone to Rotherham, apparently. Mark Harris has gone to Oxford. I didn't know about Dillon Phillips to Rotherham there. I'm going to check that because we have got some contrasting information. If he has gone to Rotherham, that's a great signing. I should be able to find out when I see Rotherham eventually. Mark Harris has gone to Oxford. Ollie Denham to Dundee. Connor Wickham, it's a shame about him, but yeah, it doesn't surprise me that he's without a club. So, my thoughts with that, I actually think Cardiff have done quite well with their transfer window. I know I've not ranked them very highly in my early predictions, but if I'm taking this transfer window into consideration, I think they have improved their squad. It's really down to me with the confidence I have in Errol Balu, to be honest. So, I feel like if he finds probably a couple more players to even spice up the squad even more, then maybe I could be swayed to predict better things for Cardiff, basically. Next up is Coventry, and they have been very busy within this transfer window. You can see here that they spent over 2 million on 2 players, and Oostend and the Belgium League in general, you know, making quite a fair few appearances. Sakamoto, they managed to get from that exact same club there. Ellis Sims from Everton is a big signing, €7 million. It's definitely one of the biggest fees paid out of every championship club this season. But then you get a couple of free transfers and a couple of really great ones as well. Jada Silva and Joe Latibodiere, free transfer. I mean, that is a very impressive deal. They got Bobby Thomas very recently. They actually announced that, I think, only a couple of days ago on their Twitter. Brad Collins, I think, is a fantastic option for goalkeeper, to be honest. I would actually already put him as number 1. I actually think he's a really good goalkeeper. In terms of the outgoings, the major one, of course, is Victor Gyökeres. I mean, to sell him for over 20 million, I actually think is fantastic for Coventry to get that sort of coverage and that money. And Gyökeres is really going to enjoy Portugal, I think. I think with Sporting, very competitive team within their league, there's a chance, you know, he could even be featured for European football and stuff. So I'm really excited to see how Gyökeres develops his game. I think this is going to be a really good move for him. Michael Rose and Tyler Walker, they've left as well, with the early one, Michael Rose, going to a championship rival in Stoke City. Tyler Walker instead going to Lincoln City. And Josh Reed going in to Ross County. And then a couple of releases as well. Dabo, you know, it's really sad about Dabo. Maguire and Todd Kane don't particularly surprise me. And Waghorn as well doesn't really surprise me either. So, on the whole, of course, keeping Gyökeres would have been so much better. But considering that they managed to act quickly with it, I don't have too many complaints with Coventry at all, to be honest. Huddersfield's next, and you can see it's very quiet. They've really only made one new signing, which was to get Chris Maxwell in from Blackpool, who was one of the 2 prominent goalkeepers we saw play for Blackpool last year. So I can't really talk about the rest of the squad. Although, if you know from my career modes, Kean Harrett, I'm very pleased he's actually starting to get a little bit of the coverage he deserves. He has actually had a couple of good spells in League One, Port Vale more specifically. In terms of the players that they let go, Kamara to Udinese, maybe a little bit of a blow considering his age and his development and stuff, but to get him for 2 million, probably a good signing there. Dalian Critchlow going to lower league teams in English League. Danny Grant going to Bohemians, and Will Boyle going to Wrexham. That's a quality signing from Wrexham. Bilokovic going to Peterborough, so another player going to the league below. And Dwayne Holmes quite recently joining Preston North End. So potentially a little bit of a shame to lose Holmes. I think Holmes was really like the only one out of those group of players that made frequent appearances. And then I'm even, excluding the likes of Aronson, Schofield and Vlasic and all those other ones just leaving the club in general. So I think quite a lot of outgoings. I would definitely like to see more ingoings from Huddersfield to give me a little bit more confidence, but I am thinking that they are in safe hands with Neil Warnock, so I think it will just be potentially a missed opportunity if I do not get any more players in and they potentially, fall short from where I think they can potentially go. Hull City is next, so let's look at these transfers here. You've got Xavier Simons from Chelsea, Lokilo from Sparta Rotterdam. You've got Liam Delap, which I think is one of the biggest signings that they've got. But if he plays like he did at Stoke, it's almost going to be not worth signing because unfortunately he really wasn't an impact at all. Now Ruben Vinagre is quite an interesting one. So he's been one that's been kind of jumping in between Wolves and Sporting. And it looks like Sporting have loaned him off to Hull. And I think that is a very interesting signing. I'll be interested to see him play in a little bit more detail potentially. Because I definitely think he's got the capability to be starting. In terms of outgoings, the major ones, really, by the looks of things, you've got Figueiredo, didn't quite work out for him. He's gone to Leicester there. Callum Elder to Derby is quite a big one. Chadwick to Stockport, 2 leagues below, Tyler Swift and Harvey Cartwright as well. So a lot of their youthful players, maybe apart from Callum Elder, who's joined Derby as a means to bolster their defence and brings a bit of experience in. So I think overall it is what I've expected with the transfer window so far. I would like to see a couple more permanent signings, I'd say. But on the whole, I think they're alright. But yeah, I'm not too sure about that Liam Delap one. I think it's going to take a lot for me to feel convinced because I was definitely very hyped when I saw him play for Manchester City in a League Cup or an FA Cup game. But at Stoke last year, he really didn't have much of an impact, I'm afraid. Ipswich are next. And I've got to say, for a newly promoted team, they are keeping themselves very, very busy. You can see that they spent $1 million on 2 players. George Hurst getting him permanently from Leicester. Fantastic signing. He was so crucial last year for that Ipswich team, especially in the later part of the season. He joined in January and was one of the most inspirational January signings I've seen for a club. A club at the time, Ipswich, around that January time, were really struggling for confidence and form. But they really, really got turned around, and George Hurst was a really big part of that. Jack Taylor getting in from Peterborough. Big fan of this one. Honestly, every time I see Jack Taylor play, I almost feel like a lot of the time the commentators don't actually notice how good he is. Just even playing the right pass, but his involvement within the game, I think he'd be a brilliant signing. That, I think, could potentially be a sneaky one to watch. Omari Hutchinson from Chelsea. This is his first major loan spell from Chelsea. 19 years of age, an attacking midfielder. He's one of Chelsea's most exciting young attacking players right now. Now, this is a lot of pressure in my opinion, Ipswich Town, but if it goes well for him, oh my gosh, the future he could have could be incredible. We've already seen Reece James with Wigan. Him at the time would have been one of the most exciting youthful players we had, and it turned out well for him. Hutchinson could be another one of those players, but I'm really, really hoping he's not played with injuries and stuff. And getting Slicker in from the Manchester City youth as well. So Ipswich looking into the Big 6 youth teams by the looks of things there. And definitely getting some young, fresh faces within that squad. Now, in terms of outgoings that make a major note, Pigott joining Leyton Orient, Kane Vincent-Young, who did kind of join here and there. He wasn't always a starter. He's joined Wickham. Raheem Harper, which I feel really bad for since he made that big mistake in the League Cup. He's really fallen out of favour in that squad. He's joined Burton Albion. Richard Keogh to Wickham. That doesn't really surprise me. He didn't seem as a long-term option there. And then you've got Mbada, Mizuni, Adame and Yengi. Those ones not really much of a surprise. So, as a whole, quite like some of their transfers. I definitely am a big fan of all three of those, actually. Don't know a lot about Slicker, to be honest. Goalkeeper as well. If they've got Walton in permanently, I think it's going to be very difficult to replace him. But I do like those other three. I think Ipswich could cause some really interesting developments, especially if they get a couple more players in. Because honestly, I think that selection is great, but I think they could even do a little bit more. I think there's a little bit more within them, and it wouldn't surprise me if they do spend a little bit more, but they've got to be a bit careful not to go too overboard. Leeds is going to be very quick and easy for me because it's been a very quiet window in terms of ingoings. Ethan Ampadu, they announced nearly a week ago, I'd say. From Chelsea, 8.1 million, so not like a loan signing, which a lot of clubs in the Championship do with Ethan Ampadu. This is a permanent signing, which is very interesting. Now, outgoings is a little bit more busy, but that's no surprise. Typically, with a recently relegated team for the Premier League, a lot of the more valued players like to seek opportunities elsewhere. So, Rodrigo has gone to Qatar, actually, which is a bit of a surprise with looking at his career. Robin Koch has gone to Eintracht Frankfurt, apparently on a loan. Tyler Roberts, we've already spoken about going to Birmingham there. Joe Robles, I was surprised he was even still at the club, to be honest, but he's gone to Saudi Arabia. Mark Roca to Real Betis. Christensen to AS Roma. And Aronson to Union Berlin. I mean, those three teams are going to be very competitive within their respective leagues, so I'm really not surprised. For sure, he's left the club. A little bit of a tribute was put out for him, a big servant there. So, as a whole, doesn't really surprise me about Leeds, but they really need to get more in my opinion. I think their business has just almost started like a good 3-4 weeks behind a lot of the other teams. So if they do manage to gel within that time, I'd be very, very impressed. Maybe Leeds are very confident with their squad already. That might be okay as well. But I would have definitely made some defensive reinforcements. Ampadu, I think, is great, but I think they need a little bit more than that, personally. Now, going about a second relegated team for the Premier League, Leicester City. It's still even strange for me to consider Leicester City as a championship team this year, but there we are. And one of the biggest transfers for today is the outgoing of Harvey Barnes. You can see here, 44 million. That's the major one there. Now, in terms of other transfers that they got in, Harry Winks, I think, is very interesting from Spurs. He's struggled for game time. He was sent out on loan, and with him being 27 now, you would think he's approaching the peak of his career, and I think this could be potentially a good season-defining one for Harry Winks to prove people wrong in a way. Connor Cody, 30 years of age, he has actually dropped down from Wolves to Leicester. That is one of the more surprising transfers I've seen, actually. Hermansen is the new goalkeeper stepping into Leicester. I mean, anything better than Danny Ward last year would have been good. No disrespect to him, but the goalkeeper and the back line were utter disaster. So I'm glad that they've managed to get people in that defensive position. And they've also got Callum Doyle, who's also done a stellar job last year with Coventry when he was at loan from Manchester City. He's now going to be at Leicester this year, so bitter rivals as well. So Coventry fans probably won't be too pleased with him there. I already mentioned about Harvey Barnes, but not quite as an expensive fee as James Maddison joining to Spurs. Newcastle and Spurs will be wanting top 4 this year. I mean, maybe not Spurs, but the expectation was you'd be hoping that they would get top 4 every year, but they'll be going through a team of transition. But Newcastle, though, I think they would be more encouraged and more confident that they can secure that top 4 place again, despite playing in Champions League. Other transfers, we've seen a lot of free transfers. Soyuncu to Atletico Madrid, Johnny Evans to Manchester United, which still surprises me. Jose Perez to Real Betis, Tielemans to Aston Villa, which was one of the earliest transfers, and Daniel Almaty going to Besiktas, which really actually makes me very happy because I've always held a grudge against Daniel Almaty since the way he celebrated when Leicester won the FA Cup over Chelsea. I've never gone over it. Just really dislike him as a player. So he can wave goodbye and enjoy his time in Turkey. Free transfer as well. Good ingoings, outgoings is what I've expected, and I think a very interesting approach this year. I think the only thing that may stop Leicester going up is if there's a little bit of a complication within the system with Enzo Maresca. But with those signings, they really should be favourites in my opinion. Middlesbrough is another team who I think will be up there within the Championship. You know, they came really close to potentially getting promoted from last season, missing out on a playoff semi-final and finishing 4th in the end. Their ingoings include Gilbert from Brentford Youth. You've got Tom Glover from Melbourne. Jamie Jones from Wigan, which I think is an interesting option for goalkeepers. Rav van den Berg, which is the brother of Sepp van den Berg, obviously from Ajax, Liverpool and Preston as well. Sam Silvera from Central Coast, so a couple of Australian league signings. Morgan Rogers, which I think is an interesting signing as well. But the big one for me is Seny Dieng. I think that is a great goalkeeper option, because they would have lost Zach Steffen because he was a loan transfer last season. And I think Seny Dieng is a decent replacement. He's proven he's a Championship level goalkeeper. And it's really just down to see if he can build up some confidence back between the sticks. Now, in terms of outgoings, Grant Hall to Rotherham, that doesn't surprise me. I think Rotherham definitely wanted to keep him with that. Daniels to Forest Green, Bowler to Samurspor in the Turkish League, Liam Roberts as a loan to Barnsley. So potentially, there's 2 goalkeeper departures. So that's why Middlesbrough have made a couple of goalkeeper additions there. So as a whole, I'm actually quite liking this Middlesbrough team. And in fact, I just noticed Joe Lumley is not even going to be featured. Neither is Darnell Fisher. So pretty big calls, because they both were featured, quite a number of times last season for me. So I think Middlesbrough definitely are seeing the best side of themselves. It's now really to see if they could do it all again and just muster up that momentum again, because they have got the potential to do it. Millwall have had a relatively quiet transfer window at the moment, but that doesn't surprise me with the horrors that they had off the pitch with their owner, may he rest in peace. With their ingoings though, when they have been able to sign players, they have done, I think, a really good job. Nisbet from Hibernian. I've occasionally heard his name on Soccer Saturday when I've been watching games, so I can only assume that he's had a really good season in the Scottish League, so I think Mill may have got a good centre forward on their hands. Joe Bryan, very experienced player, defender within the Championship. He is joined from Fulham on a free. Wes Harding, they signed quite recently from Rotherham, also on a free. Has played a lot of minutes last year, so he can definitely be one who can be filtered in and, can definitely play a good part within that team. And Casper De Noor, someone I don't know so well. He's Belgian. He's from the Belgian League, OH Leuven. Again, that's not the first time I've seen that club being featured as well. So, again, a little bit of a trend going on with Championship clubs picking up players from the Belgian leagues, which I think is actually quite interesting. In terms of outgoings, Mason Bennett is actually gone to the league below to join Burton Albion. Malone leaving quite surprised me a little bit. Sanford, and then with that as well. So I do think, whilst there's not been much activity, I think what they have done, Millwall, is a lot of good. And if they can even add few more additions, I think Millwall could pretty much do a fantastic job again. I really do. So now we go to Norwich City. This will be their 2nd consecutive season within the Championship. Their signings, a lot of free transfers. You can see Borges signs, Shane Duffy, who they managed to get from Fulham, very experienced, obviously would have played with Brighton as well. Jack Stacey getting in from Bournemouth, I think is probably their best signing actually, in my opinion. And Ashley Barnes. So I was very mixed on Ashley Barnes last year at Burnley. I think he popped up with some crucial goals, but considering the gap that they have to fill with Timo Pukki leaving to join Minnesota in the MLS, Ashley Barnes is not going to score the same amount of goals that Pukki scored. I mean, Pukki barely scored last year. He's clearly had 2 rough seasons and he's now probably trying to wind down his career. But they really need to find, in my opinion, a more exciting player to potentially burst on the scene and just score up to 20 goals, because I think Norwich really do need the coverage they have with their forward line. Other outgoings, Ballymumba to Plymouth, who we'll literally talk about as our next team. That is a really good deal for Plymouth, because Plymouth got him last year and he was probably the top 2 best players for Plymouth easily. The amount of crucial goals Mumba scored, he actually scored a last minute goal against Ipswich at Portman Road, which I remember very, very well. And he may have actually got the winner in the reverse game as well. So Mumba is definitely a talent, and he will be fantastic for Plymouth. But potentially Norwich fans would have wanted to see him, get featured. So potentially a bad one for Norwich, but a fantastic one for Plymouth. Kieran Dow to Rangers, interesting. Sinani to St. Pauli, and Michael McGovern to Hearts. Kamara also leaving to join Portsmouth, and Byram and Martin are without a club. So a couple of outgoings there. And with ingoings go, a lot of experience I'm seeing, but not potentially ones that will stick around with the club for up to 4 or 5 years, let's say. So long term, I have a bit of concern. I definitely would like to see, potentially a signing that's going to excite me a little bit more. I just feel a little bit underwhelmed with this transfer window for Norwich so far. Is it just me? Let me know what you think, Norwich fans, in the comments down below. Now we go to Plymouth. I was just mentioning that we will be talking about them, and already I'm loving that they've got Whittaker and Mumba back, reuniting the band back together. Those 2 loans last year were a major part of Plymouth's success, and now they've brought them in permanently. That is going to do Plymouth the whole world of good, in my opinion. Another 3 transfers I think are going to be quite interesting. Lewis Gibson being a very interesting one. Kessler Hayden getting on loan from Aston Villa, I actually think is a decent signing as well. Outgoings go, Ennis I think is the big one. We've already spoken about him for Blackburn. You've also got a couple more older players leaving, Danny Mayer and James Wilson, for instance. But you've also got a couple of players going to leagues below. Frini Krask going to Torquay, saying with Jeffcott, he's gone to the Scottish League, which actually surprised me a little bit, because Luke Jeffcott, especially last season, actually, I think was quite crucial at times, but I don't think he had that same impact that he had within the most recent season. I think Hardy kind of stole the headlines from him in a way, in that more advanced position there. So overall, I quite like that they've got Whittaker and Mumba back. Those 2 already give me so much faith that Plymouth can survive, and I really hope they do. That would be a fantastic story to see them survive. We've now made it to Preston North End. They've made a couple of signings. So Jensen from Odense in the Danish League is one of their most recent ones. Dwayne Ohms, a little bit more experienced attacking midfielder from Huddersfield. Will Keane, also more experienced, getting him in from Wigan. But the most recent signing is definitely Leighton Stewart from the Liverpool youth team. Not seen a lot of him, but I've heard some really great things about him. And in fact, again, another Liverpool youth player, Calvin Ramsey, getting him on loan. So we maybe could see a Liverpool connection there. Right back to centre forward there. So potentially we could see that. I mean, did they kind of try that already with Sepp van den Berg and it didn't quite work? So I'll have a little bit more faith with Ramsey and Stewart. I'm not going to write them off straight away so far. Outgoings wise, Johnson I think is the biggest outgoing they've had. They couldn't extend his contract, and he's also joined Stoke City, reuniting with former Preston manager Alex Neil, of course. And yeah, he'll be the major loss out of those 3. So apart from that, I think Preston have done all right, but I don't think they've done anything amazing, in my opinion. QPR are next. Now, in terms of their transfers, they've been a little bit more busy than I remember. Asmir Begovic, 36 years of age, and in his last championship season, he was amazing with Bournemouth. So if he can have that same level with QPR, he could potentially save them from the drop, honestly. Some of the saves he can pull off, and he was really, really good. He was definitely, I think, up there for the top 2 best goalkeepers in the season where Bournemouth were in the championship last. So QPR may have really hit the jackpot with that one there, and a brilliant replacement for Seny Dieng. Not long term by all means, but it gives them enough time to potentially find a good youthful goalkeeper to fill his spot. Lecek as well from the Fulham youth team. I've really butchered that name, so sorry. Paul Smythe from Leyton Orient as well, who I think did have a major part actually in Leyton Orient's promotion as well. And Taylor Richards from Brighton is also an interesting one too. With outgoings, you've got, obviously, we talked about a couple of them already, Rob Dickey to Bristol City and Seny Dieng to Middlesbrough. So yeah, a couple of them going to other championship clubs, which is a bit of a blow from that part of things. Other outgoings, you know, without a club currently, Chris Martin's a big one. Amos is another one who just couldn't really get a consistent run of games. So ultimately, there's been quite a fair bit of change with QPR. The only thing that I still have doubts is still the squad and then the manager as well, in my opinion. But I definitely think they've made a couple of really good signings, and I think Begovic is definitely one to keep your eyes on. Rotherham are the next team to talk about within the transfer window, and you can see right here that they've gone mainly cheap at the moment. You have Cafu from Forest, Grant Hall from Middlesbrough, which I think is a good signing actually, and Dylan Phillips. So it is official. Apparently, Dylan Phillips is a Rotherham goalkeeper. So I don't know why Transfermarkt confused me with that, but if that is the case, that is a very recent transfer, because I did not know Dylan Phillips is now a Rotherham player. I actually think that's a decent addition, to be honest. I really do think so. In terms of outgoings, Richard Wood, probably one of the major ones, and Wes Harding actually. Wes Harding's probably the biggest loss that they've got. Kyoso, maybe they could have trusted him a little bit, but they've loaned him out to Peterborough instead. Ogbene actually would be up there as well with Wes Harding. Ogbene was up there actually and scored some really crucial goals, especially at the beginning part of the season. He's joined Luton Town. So Ogbene and Harding for me are the two biggest outgoings. Ingoings go, I think they're good players, don't get me wrong, but I don't think they're anything at the same level. And, you know, they're not really replacing those major positions as well. So I don't know about Rotherham, to be honest with you. I think their intentions are good, but whether it's going to gel into a team that can survive, I'm not so sure. Sheffield Wednesday again, like I said with Leeds, this is going to be a very quick one because they've made little to no business. They got Reece James in from Blackpool, and that is pretty much it in terms of ingoings. Outgoings wise, which are the biggest ones, probably Dele Bashiru going to the Turkish League, and Jayden Brown actually going to Lincoln, surprised me a little bit as well. And then you got Hunt, Adeniran without a club there. So it's a shame, really. I really wanted Sheffield Wednesday to do quite a fair bit more than this, to be honest. Considering they have to play the first game in the Championship season on the Friday against Southampton. One of the favourites who we're literally going to talk about Southampton next, actually. But I don't know how I feel about Wednesday. You know, I backed them to survive in my early predictions. And I think their squad is good enough to survive, but this lack of activity does concern me a little bit, whether, you know, they've really been trying to save their pockets. So, I don't know. I'm very mixed with Sheffield Wednesday at the moment. Like I said, it transitions very well because now we're talking about Southampton. They got Shea Charles, probably the biggest fees so far I've actually seen from any club, actually. It'll be up there with the Harry Winks fee from Leicester. 12.25 million euros. From a youth player, that is big money. A defensive midfielder too, and maybe they got him in with the fear that they could lose part of their midfield. You know, I know Lavia's been linked. I think Lavia is not confirmed yet, but he's been linked definitely with Liverpool, who would be around there as well. And I think it's not really going to end there for Southampton. I definitely think at the moment they've done really well to actually keep the players they have kept at the moment. But I think we are going to see more movement there. Orsic to Transfer to get to about 4 million out of him, actually. I think it's quite decent. List 2, Gutzets. So a couple of Turkish league signings there for Southampton there. Caballero's retired. And we've got Walcott and Eluisi without a club, which I think is a real shame for both of them there. Because I would have actually loved to see them actually in the Championship. So Southampton going with this. Shea Charles definitely the Hollywood signing at the moment. And then can't forget about Ryan Manning. You know, that is a really big blow for Swansea to lose out of keeping him in the end. But he is going to reunite with former Swansea City boss, of course, Russell Martin. So couldn't really turn that down, I feel, you know, with a Premier League proven club in my opinion. Stoke City are next, and they could be a wild card. And I feel like we say that a lot of the time with Stoke, but I mean it. I do think Stoke could potentially be something special this year. Daniel Johnson coming in, Ender Stevens, Michael Rose, I think are great signings. Ben Pearson, I think is a good signing. So already seeing similarities with Johnson and then Pearson coming in. Two of Alex Neil's favourite Preston players reuniting again. Chiquino, who they got in today as a recording, as a loan transfer from Wolves, I think is decent. And another Wolves loan transfer in Kenny Jana Hueva as well. So I do think Stoke have actually made some good signings, actually. In terms of outgoings, Nick Powell's the big one to go from to Stockport there. Unfortunately, he had an injury and then his form just kind of dipped, I'm afraid, and he didn't really pick it back up. Flintstone out of club, same with Klukas, Morgan Fox as well. So that's a real shame with those ones because they have talent, but it's clear that it didn't just work out for them. Sunderland is next, and they've made some money signings there. Silt from PSV youth team for €2 million, quite bold. Joe Bellingham, you know, for a 17-year-old to pay over €1.5 million for, is quite bold for me. Triantis, who managed to get from the Australian League, I think also quite bold as well. Semedo getting in from Benfica youth, quite bold. So I do think Sunderland being very bold, but also very interesting. You can see the approach that they're going, a very youthful themed side at the moment. The oldest out of those players that they've signed is 20 years of age, which does tell you about the approach Sunderland are going for. They're clearly satisfied with the experience, but they want more youth, and I think that's definitely a good idea. In terms of their outgoings, Bailey Wright and Dejaku, Alex Bass going to Wimbledon there, doesn't really surprise me, and then Winchester to Shrewsbury. So outgoings wise, nothing major yet. Stewart is heavily linked though, so whether he will go, who knows. But if Sunderland actually keep things like this, I actually think that's a pretty hecking decent window, to be honest. Swansea City are next, and obviously they've not really had a lot of business, but they have had the drama of Russell Martin leaving and then having to get Michael Duff in from Barnsley as a new manager there as well. He would have wanted, you know, players that he would have wanted to take potentially from lower leagues, and we're already seeing Jerry Yates and Josh Key being two exact examples of those. In terms of outgoings, Obafemi doesn't surprise me. Whitaker, you know, potentially he could have had a bit of a run. Manning and Latibodiere are two key, like, starting 11 players, and to lose them to both championship rivals as well, I think that's a little bit of a blow on Swansea City's part. I think maybe could they've done a little bit more to tie them down to the club, maybe. I don't know, but I do think that is a bit of a blow, and in my opinion, they've not really replaced them at the moment. So Swansea, I definitely think have got more work to do with their outgoings. Now, Watford, last time I checked when I returned from YouTube, they barely had anything loaded down, but you can see how more busier it has become, and I'm glad that Watford have kind of smelt the coffee a little bit and are now starting to get their act on together. When I looked at this last time, their only signing was Tom Ince. Now they've added 3 more signings to that repertoire. Jake Livermore coming in for experience, Reece Healy coming in for Toulouse in the French league, and Chakvadadze, oh gosh, I really butchered that, I'm really sorry, from Ghent, another Belgian league signing. Very, very interesting again. In terms of outgoings, the major one with the biggest fee is João Pedro to Brighton. He actually scored against Chelsea in their pre-season friendly from the penalty spot for €34.2 million. Troost-Ekong has gone to PAOK, and Hungbo has gone to Leeuwenburg in the, I think it's the second division of Bundesliga, actually. So, yeah. And Kina as well has gone to Udinese, which with that Udinese and Watford connection, that doesn't really surprise me either. And they've lost some big personalities. Bakuna, cleverly retiring, Gasper, you know, they've lost some big players. And Hassan Malonga as well. You know, major players that Watford have lost. Ingoings-wise, Livermore and Ince I think are okay, but they're nothing spectacular for me. I do think Watford need to show something. I would be really excited if they were to get like a really young player that is one of the hottest, you know, prospects right now, and who can really rip it apart in the Championship. I think Watford are really missing just a little bit more excitement, you know. Quite like a couple of these other teams, you know, I'm expecting a little bit more considering what Watford are as a team. We finally end this marathon on West Brom, and thankfully it's an easy one because they've not got anyone. They've not signed a single player, which I think is getting really frustrating for the fan base at the moment at West Brom. West Brom fans, if you're watching, let me know how you feel about your club at the moment and the transfer business in the comments. In terms of outgoings, you can see a major one there. Dara O'Shea joining Burnley, who would have been decent within the back line of West Brom last year. Jake Livermore, I just spoke about joining Watford there. Carla Grant joining another Championship club, Cardiff on loan, which we've mentioned as well. And then we've got a couple with our club as well, Brian and Rogers with our club. So very quiet and, you know, very uninspiring for West Brom. I really like to see them do a lot more than this, because by no means was last season a success. It was far from it. So I really want to see West Brom to see if they could potentially get some players in to potentially give their fans something to say, you know what, we mean business this year. But yeah, I'm not really seeing that at the moment, sadly. So that wraps up all of the transfers that I've been able to catch up on. If I've missed any, of course, please let me know in the comments down below. I'm really hoping they don't do too much signings after, because right now this took a long time to go through. But if you enjoyed me covering your Championship club today, let me know in the comments down below of your thoughts of the current transfer window situation, and who do you think has had the best and the worst window so far. I would also love to hear that as well. Please smash the like button if you've not done so. It really does help the growth of this channel. Please do hit that subscribe button if you've not done so as well. And please also share as well. All these things really, really do help me as well. So that's going to wrap it up for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are legendary. It's on the end of this video. And as always, I'll see you guys soon. Take care, everyone.